Hi, Ruben van Roon Drum Channel again, and today's topic and subject is jazz drumming. It's a very big topic, so I try to make it small for you all. But first, like and subscribe, of course, and leave a thumb up and a comment. That would be so nice. So jazz music, that's a very big thing. This video, the purpose of this video is two things. It's the first thing is that it's for people who think jazz music, maybe that's interesting. They come out of a completely different genre of music. And I give some tips and tricks about that. It's also a little bit an in-depth of my teaching, how I teach jazz music. The most important thing in jazz music is syncopation. Maybe you heard of that word. So what is syncopation? You make the weak parts of the bar strong. So the first syncopation in quarter notes is that you accent count 2 and 4. And 1 is the strongest and 3 is the sub-strongest. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's actually already a jazz beat. Jazz music started really like a march, rudimental quarter note thing. This was actually the first jazz groove in the 1920s. Like that. And they did that really to the right cymbal when they could record right cymbals. So first they only played it on the snare because they couldn't record right cymbals yet. Then it really went. And that bass is really tapping along. You have to really make it with heels down. And that's really 4 on the floor, we call that. Later on in the development of jazz music, they skipped that one and made it also like a melody part. So I started always with my students to teach them quarter notes, because quarter notes are for me the most important thing in jazz music. And then with this accent thing. To emphasize this 2 and 4, the jazz drummers kick their hi-hat on the 2 and the 4. Really like this. And that's really hard because that's actually the backbeat of your music. So it's really a snappy, small kind of thing. But that's the most important thing in jazz music, because here's your groove. And in your right hand. That are the two parts who make it groove. And so you play quarter notes again with this hi-hat. It looks very simple, but it's really hard to make this groove. For me, and for a lot of drummers, a big inspiration is the Oscar Peterson trio without drums. It's Ray Brown on bass and Herb Ellis on guitar and Oscar Peterson. You see here a link of the album. And you can play only this quarter note thing with it. Brian Blade told in a masterclass that he only plays hours and hours with a bass player quarter notes. So now I'm the bass player also. And why I don't play the normal traditional jazz cymbal pattern that's written out in every book like this. Because in my opinion, I think you have to learn that jazz is quarter note music. If you listen to all the great old jazz drummers, and I can advise you to listen, the first record you have to listen if you want to learn a little bit about the music is Kind of Blue of Miles Davis with Jimmy Cobb on drums. And I loved myself the Thelonious Monk Quartet albums in the 60s with Frankie Dunlop. Frankie Dunlop is for me one of the greatest unknown jazz drummers around. It was the Steve Gadd of the 60s. He was so melodic and so musical as a drummer, and had such a groove. It was incredible. And you have, of course, Art Taylor, Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach. They really play. But for your independence later on, it's really nice to actually learn that right symbol and play your independence exercise on it. But it's so important that you first master to groove in every music. So when you do a jazz gig and you only play like this, that will be good enough if it grooves. It's one of the most well-known phrases in jazz music, and that's the quarter note triplet. So you skip when you play 8-note triplets, 1 ND, 2 ND, 3 ND, 4 ND. You can do two things. You can play your left hand on your leg and your right hand on the hi-hat. 1 ND, 2 ND, 3 ND, 4 ND. And now you play here the quarter note triplet. 1 ND, 2 ND, 3 ND, 4 ND, 1 ND, 2 ND. So that's a really nice phrasing. So we call it jazz 8 notes. So we have straight 8 notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we have the triplet thing where the middle triplet is gone. And then it's 1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D. So it's really nice to make it swing. You see that jazz drummers really play upwards, you know, like the upstroke. Instead of more in the pop and the funk and the rock thing, it's more down. So the most two different things comparing to that music is this is all on the beat. And jazz music is more off the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The second one is the dynamics. Here, your bass drum and your snare drum are really strong. But in jazz music, this is really strong, and your hi-hat and your bass and your snare are really soft, and that's so hard. That you play very soft in jazz music. It's acoustic music, so a lot of times the piano player is sparsely amplified, and the large bass player hate to make his bass amplified because his sound is gone. So that's really soft. So you most of the times you really play on this dynamic. So that's really hard, but really good for your technical skills. It's nice to play quarter notes and then play the syncopation notes on your snare. And here, for the independence on the right hand, you play the quarter notes. The exercise, you can move on and you can play it with your bass drum. One and D2 and D3 and D4 and D1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D. So try to really feel that syncopation thing. So I only play the syncopation notes, you know. 1 and D2 and D3 and D4 and D1. So you have to really feel this area in the measure. The music of jazz, you really have to listen again to that record. And it's all about structure and form. So you really have to know what a standard is or what a blues is. And you have to know what improvisation is. So in the books, the jazz books like the Mel Bay Cook book or the John Riley book or the Jim Chapman Independence book, are great books to learn your independence jazz beats, but they're all written out in a loop form. In a Mel Bay Cook book and Jim Chapman, it's one measure, so you actually have to play. But in jazz music, you never repeat the same thing, you know. It's not loop music like in funk. You're always looping to get the groove, you know. But the loop actually is in your right hand and your hi-hat thing. What you're doing on the snare and on the bass, we call it accompaniment. You know? And that I'm a Dutch guy. So there you play the melodies. Let's say that there's another word for it. It's now written down. That's what I mean. But and that's the music making you do. So you react on what the piano player is playing and what the saxophone and the trumpet players are playing. That's the improvisation part. But you have to learn the skills that what you hear, you can play. So you have to learn all the possible independence things that you can play what you hear. So it's hard to play it now because there's no context, you know. It's really about playing the music, you know, playing the jazz music, and don't keep on in a loop. Be free about it. The dynamics, man. So you have to play soft. And it's so hard if you're coming out of the rock and the pop music to get that bass drum, and especially the bass drum soft, because everybody is used to play heels up. But it's really hard to play a soft reel up bass drum. So you really have to learn your heels down to tap actually on your bass drum, you know. When you start more like playing fills and soloing, you know, then you have a couple of aspects you can pick out, a couple of vocabulary you have to learn. The first vocabulary is, of course, the rudiments. So practice your rudiments. I have a lot of videos on my channel about the rudiments. Then you have to be familiar with the triplet thing, you know. It's a lot of fills. You start in triplets. Like single stroke triplets. single stroke triplets. If you move that around, you get really a Max Rhodes kind of thing. It's really nice. So what I did was I just play single stroke triplets, but the nicest thing to do, actually, that's another tip, if you combine binary with ternary, and that makes it really hip very instantly. What I mean is you go to the straight 16 notes or the straight 8 notes. So first the 8 notes. $60 notes. Okay, so this is it for now. A short lesson about jazz music. Don't forget to subscribe and to thump it up, and I see you next time. Bye-bye.